Hey guys, this is Whyt Manga, the creator of PAPERBACK. It's available online. At least the first two chapters, y'all can go read it, and come back and tell me what you think. So far, I've gotten a lot of positive reviews, so thanks for that, and thanks for everybody who supported the comic and who supported the comic so far. This tutorial is basically going to be on backgrounds. This was a background that I did earlier on an earlier video, and I talked about how I'll do this one, and that was just more giving tips. Y'all can check that out. Some of the things you need to keep in mind when you're doing backgrounds is having some form of storyboard or layout, and that's where all your sketches and your ideas are going to be placed and stuff like that, and you will look to transfer that into a better form, basically using perspectives and all the other art tips, guides, and techniques, to pull off your background. Now, when trying to pull off a background like this, this is the simple sketch. To pull off a background like this, you have to keep a couple things in mind. First off, this background it doesn't exist anywhere. It only exists in my head, and for some comics they do kind of the same thing, creating worlds that don't currently exist. And one of the ways to go about doing that, you might want to get reference from actual images of real places that might be similar. Also keep in mind the angle you want. Understand perspective, at least to some degree. I'm going to go over that right now. What I just drew across was the like the horizon kind of thing, is the horizon line, and I'm kind of using this is 2-point perspective, and you can see the 2 points at the left and there's one at the right, and it's outside the actual panel. You can actually go wider, but I wanted the point to be I wanted to be at 1 point, so I didn't want like an extra paper, or like I didn't want to mess things up. If the paper was bigger and there was more space on sides, I might have pushed it a little further, but it's okay how it is. And I'm going to use those points to basically draw some shapes and get like building shapes. And the angle I have chosen here is kind of from the top ish, and so this is not, it's not like a 100% up view, but I'm using the top, and I'm making sure all the lines are going to those points. And then for now I'm just going to go with basic shapes, and what I'm trying to do is duplicate my sketch but a little more refined. One of the things you need to keep in mind as well is having trees, where the trees are going to be placed, how the windows are going to be, satellites, tanks, roofs, poles, animals if you want like birds flying, because this image is going to have some at the top is going to have like a sky a little bit. And the way the perspective works, as you can see, all those lines are pointing to that dot, and there's another dot at the right, and those are, they're pointing to that dot. And if you do everything correctly, it's going to be very accurate to real life. There is also a dot at the bottom, but in this case I didn't do that because there was no space on the paper really. If the dot at the bottom is really below, to the point where you don't see it, and sometimes you might have to just wing it really. If the dot is kind of on, if the dot is as close as the vanishing points on the left and the right, because that's what they're called vanishing points. If the third vanishing points at the bottom is kind of on the page, and it'll kind of have this warped look, which is not incorrect, but that's not what I'm going for here. So for the lines that for the vertical lines, you kind of have to wing it, but just keep in mind that they're all also going to 1 point. Now they don't look like they're going to 1 point, but if this was a huge paper, I could draw all those lines to that point. Now obviously I'm winging it here, so they're probably it's not going to be perfect, but at some times like this, you kind of have to wing it. If you looked at the sketch, you might have seen the vanishing points I used as well. I still didn't have the third vanishing point, so this is kind of three 3-point perspective ish kind of tutorial. Maybe I'll have a separate tutorial on vanishing points just to focus on that, but I'll go on that later. For now, this tutorial is kind of assuming that you have an idea of what what perspective is, and we're just gonna go from there. So I'm just giving you, showing you. Really, what I'm teaching is for you the things you need to think about when you're creating backgrounds like this. This background is for my comic Apple Black, and obviously the world in Apple Black doesn't exist anywhere. I'm making all these things up, so these are things you have to think about, like posters, poster signs. Maybe you have a tank at the top of a building. You also have to think of the angle like the camera angle you're choosing. All these are factors that you have to put into consideration. Also, you should have a theme. The buildings should have some kind of theme that they belong together. At least they belong in the same comic. A tip I could give would be to, look at real places. Go to Google Images. It's godsend. You can you can get a lot of reference from there. Another thing is you can go look at your favorite mangas and try to see how these artists, trying to put your mind, try to think, I don't know, imagine how these artists put these the buildings together, what they were thinking about, how do these, like, what makes these backgrounds connect, what's the theme behind them. And you can pull out yours and try to implement your theme into your backgrounds. You can have your aesthetic. Maybe all the backgrounds have some kind of design. They just pull them together to give them that identity. You have to think of that. Think of background. Think of buildings, right? This is also it's kind of like a architectural kind of thing where you have to think of, be logical with where windows are supposed to be, and how the windows are going to look. And every building is not going to have the same kind of window, or everything. Things are going to be different. Each building is to be realistic and logical. Each building is probably built by different people, different architects and whatever. So these are things you have to keep in mind. Also, another thing that you notice is, well, you can't see it in this skit. I'm still, putting everything together, and adds, like I said earlier, all the straight lines, they're all pointing to either the vanishing point on the left or to the vanishing point on the right. They really work together, and when you're done with something like this, it all looks pretty accurate at the end. So the windows, everything's going to point to that direction. You can play around with the roofs. The roofs can have, whatever kind of design. Think of, like, this is not like a real place. If I was drawing like a real place, then yeah, you could use reference and check out some like roofs and get reference from there. But generally, these places don't exist, so you have that freedom to design whatever kind of roof you want to you want. But at the same time, you have to be realistic, and that's where getting reference from say like real buildings, that's where that plays into this. Let me see now. Right now that's just like that's like an atmospheric kind of thing. All the buildings at the back, they're gonna fade away. Just a cloud. That's like the cloud. And for the most part, this is pretty much done. I just wanted to narrate as I was creating this page for the comic, and I just want you to like notice things. How you can't really see the floor because buildings are over each other. Also think about bridges, because people forget about stuff like that. How like here I have like a building connected to another building with a bridge. You just try to be creative and think out the box. Like I said, you should sit down and study other comic artists or your favorite manga and try to figure out what makes them click. And you can also get reference from real images. Then also think about what you want the aesthetic to be, what the theme behind the buildings should be, and I guess that will make everything, you know, stick together and stand out as you know, your own idea. No one's gonna look at this and be like, oh, I've seen this before. No. Um. So yeah, that's the basic about it. Also think about where the individual things are gonna be placed. So basically, what I'm saying and repeat is just, you know, always look for reference, and you're not gonna. There's no background tutorial that's gonna teach you, like, solidify or cement it in your skull. It's really practice, and after a while, you know, you will get better at it. Right now, right now I am just inking everything out with Sakura Micron inking pens, and that's what I use to ink. Normally, when I'm inking people or stuff like that, I tend to use a G pen. But for drawing any form of straight lines, even the panel lines on this manga page, I use the Sakura. I have a separate video that focuses on inking, and that will go into more detail of how I ink. You know the tips I give when it comes to inking in general. And I also have more tutorials on me using the G pen, Sakura Micron sketching, and so on and so forth. I'll leave links, and you see more links at the end of the video. So now I'm just going over the lines, basic stuff. Also keep in mind, you're not going to use the ruler for everything. There are some things that, if there's like a flag in the background, you probably want to go freehand with that. Or the trees, obviously you don't use, you're not going to use like a ruler for a tree, you know, like the leaves and all that. You're going to probably want to go, you definitely want to go freehand. Another thing is, there isn't one exact way to draw backgrounds. I've seen artists that create backgrounds without rulers, and it works for them. So if you feel that you don't need rulers, I mean, you will still need the concept of perspective. That's, like I said, that comes with practice. And if you feel, you know, you can go freehand with the whole thing and it works for you, then so be it, you know. But for the most part, especially if you're doing like say you're doing like a shonen kind of thing, from my experience, I've never seen it work. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I've never seen it work without rulers. Another thing is shading. When you're shading, you want to shade like pretty close. You're not shading like human skin or whatever. So at least when I shade, the way I shade with the ruler, and I keep the lines pretty thin and close to each other, because, you know, it's far away. If it was a human being, I shade freehand and stuff like that. But, you know, you also shade to the direction of the vanishing points if you're going left or you're going right or whatever. But if you're going down, just straight down. After this, you know, I get rid of the pencils and I scan it in, and this is where I put in tone and full blacks over the background to just, you know, make it pop out a whole lot more. So this is the scan page, and I've erased all the pencils. And the dots at the edges are just for me to know where the page cuts out. And I talk more about what that is on another tutorial, and I think that's how to tone, so you can go check that out. But I talk about the paper. I talk more about the deleter paper, the paper I use to draw, the comic paper. I talk more about that on a sketching tutorial. I have a bunch of other tutorials. Like I said, I'll leave links to that. This is Manga Studio 5, and this is what I use to tone generally. I, you know, would use like screen tones and whatever, but they're pretty expensive, and, you know, they have a limit. But this, you know, going digital with it, if you can pull it off, you can use digital media to even make it seem like it's traditional. Even though generally Apple Black, for the most part, is a traditional manga, is just the tones are digital, and obviously the text. So what I do when I ink, like I said, if you're curious to how I ink these kind of characters. These were done with a G pen, and there is a tutorial on that as well. Here I'm just cleaning stuff, things that I don't feel came out right, came out looking a little sloppy or whatever. Another thing to keep in mind is when inking in general, any kind of inking, is patience, which is something I don't have sometimes. But I guess it's something to keep in mind, because you don't want to rush things and you end up having a lot of mistakes, and you can easily prevent all of that. Also, aside from the shading, another thing that brings some backgrounds to life are cracks. But the thing is, sometimes I've seen people overdo cracks. Think of you keep in mind that some buildings are newer than others. So if it's a new building, it's probably not going to have that much, where it's not going to be worn out. There's not going to be a lot of cracks here and there. It's going to be pretty straightforward. But if it's a really old building and stuff like that, you might see more cracks, more shading, more more straight line shading or whatever, depending on the background. If it's just boulders, those are done pretty differently. I'm just pointing out things that you should keep in mind when creating backgrounds. So here for the window, some people leave the windows white, some people shade in the windows with ink, some people use the gradient, and that's what I just did. And I kind of mess with all techniques. Here I'm just using shadows. Some people try to shade with the shadows, but if you feel that at least the way I do it, if I feel that the ink lines are too thick and I can see them from far too much, especially for something that's far away, that far away, instead of inking it, I rather just go in completely with a tone and make it work as a shadow. It's almost like cell shading. And those are like trees that are in between things. Sometimes, if you notice, keep in mind that there are scenarios where you can have trees that will be in between buildings. So we may not get to see the floor. If you're worried about a lot of drawings that are going to be on the floor, you're not going to see that. And this is the finished result. And voila. The stuff at the back is just more toning. Like I said, if you want more toning tutorials, those will be coming up. I also have a tutorial on how to create a sky in Manga Studio for like a manga page, and that'll come eventually. These are videos that I was, and you can click on that for more. For everybody who supported PAPERBACK in this channel, thank you. You can check out my Facebook, Twitter, and my DeviantArt, links below. And for place to read PAPERBACK on Saturday AM, there's a link below as well. So subscribe if you like these videos. These kinds of videos and more. I have cooler stuff coming along. If you enjoyed the video, thank you. Stay tuned. Click, do whatever. It's Whyt Manga, and I'm out.